All right. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late here. I was attending something really urgent, but we can continue our discussion of lecture series of module number 2, ideally. All right. So maybe kindly wanted to find out if you can hear me just fine. I know you can see my screen, but okay, thanks. Anyways, so on with it. If you remember, we had started looking at the case study example, is it? The case study example of, I want to say, a unique case where integration and configuration is in full swing. And so in essence, I'm using my I want to call this my blog, my personal blog, which runs off of WordPress. And what I highlighted was this notion that this blog ideally leverages integration and configuration at a very high level first, because it turns out that to build this website, so if you go to lightonphiri.org or something, to build this website, what I did was I just used WordPress ideally. Okay, so that's the one thing here. And then what we discovered was that, you know, when you're building a website, when you're setting up a website, it turns out that there's a couple of other important things that you have got to take into account. And specifically, in this particular case, I'm referring to the fact that you'd have to control the look and feel. So I hinted at the fact that an option for controlling this look and feel is you use what's called a template, a scheme. If you don't use a scheme, you can actually hard code this thing. Right? So you write your own HTML, you create your spaghetti code or something like that, and then you're done, right? But we say that with WordPress, what is particularly interesting or intriguing about WordPress is the fact that it's the fact that the WordPress CMS itself, right? The WordPress content management system itself, it turns out, is built in such a way that it's modular, right? So modular in the sense that you can associate it with multiple schemes, and you must understand this, right? Typically, when you are using this, right, a generic CMS, a lot of people, right? A lot of people use or adoption. I'll just say adoption is high. Now, when adoption is high, people may want to use this generic platform in so many different ways. So, for instance, an individual like myself would want to use WordPress so that I put up my blog. An entity, you know, like State House, may want to use WordPress so that they put up a website, right, for State House or something like that. An organization like UNZA may want to put up their institutional website. Now, and you begin to notice that in all of these three different scenarios, the requirements are different, right, in terms of the aesthetics. You know, for a personal blog, maybe you might want a little bit of fanfare, you're playing around with fonts or something, but for a professional entity like State House, like the University of Zambia website, you have to think long and hard about how you're going to do that, right? So with that in mind, these tools are built in such a way that they are flexible when it comes to modification, right? So they're built using what's called the modular architecture, right? Or plug-in based architecture, where you can plug in things, right? Plug and play, ideally. Okay. So we discovered really that if you use WordPress, you have this feature that allows you to change the look and feel through the use of themes. Now, themes themselves, it turns out, a type of software, right? It's a type of software application really that focuses on the front-facing part of the application, the user interface ideally. It's like, how beautiful can you make the front-facing interface? What fonts should we use? You know, what buttons should we use and all that? And the problem that themes we typically solve is one of consistency, right? Because when I'm accessing my website, whether I'm on the home page or I go to my publications page, ideally the look and feel of this should be somewhat similar. This should be consistent. Observe, on the home page, the content that I'm rendering is different. These are blog posts, quite all right. But if I go to the About Me page, what you'll notice is that the same look and feel is maintained, is it? Specifically pay particular attention to the menu items, right? If I go here, same menu items, right? The things that you are seeing on the right panel here are consistent, right? More or less the same. The search bar is still there. Search bar is here. If people want to subscribe to my blog, they can type in their address and click on subscribe, right? So a subscription feature is there as well. So themes will address the issue of consistency ideally, and aesthetics really, right? Because in as much as you're accessing different content, right? If I go on these different pages here, in as much as I'm accessing different content, it turns out that the look and feel, the types of font faces that I'm using, the size of the fonts for specific sections of this website must be maintained again, right? So you have themes. So themes are essentially like it's an application. It's a standard. You can view a theme as a standalone application. However, it works in the same way as if you remember my mention of Apache Solar, for instance, where on its own it's not going to be that useful. So it has got to be plugged into an existing application. Much like if you remember your ICT 1110 or something, there was mention of things like I want to say plugins, right, or extensions. Is it? If I want to use like right now here in this course, when I'm using Google Meet, I take attendance using a plugin, right? Google Meet attendance list. Okay. Now the Google Meet attendance list is like it's a standalone application, but so its class is in session, is it? It's a standalone application, but the way it works is on its own. It's not going to be useful in any way. It only works when there's a specific host application available. In this particular case, the host application is Google Meet. So themes, when it comes to WordPress, work in more or less the same way. If that makes sense. Anyways, and again, I showcased to you, if you just look up WordPress themes, you notice that there's a whole slew of and you probably want to go to the official theme directory for WordPress, right? But there are other dedicated websites that will offer premium themes, so paid for themes. There are specific companies that have specialized in what they do is they just create WordPress themes. So if you look at, I think Theme Forest is one such company, right? If you go to Theme Forest, you notice that a number of their themes essentially are premium themes, so you need to pay money for you to gain access to the themes. And they spend a lot of time creating themes that are professional in nature, right? If you look at the price points here, $99 and stuff, although there's a discount here, it's $49, it's $39, and so they typically have a license associated with them. Anyways, but yeah, usually if you when you're looking at themes, right? If you just spend a considerable amount of time on the WordPress themes directory, you'll be able to find professional looking themes. Easy, actually. You can filter by the layout. You're just looking for one column themes, the ones that have two columns and stuff. You can filter by subject, right? And you notice the subject here is aligned with the potential web application you may want to put up, right? A website if you want. So if you want to build, if you're building a website for an educational entity, right? Let's say a school, for instance, or a university, what you could do is you can filter and say, I'm just looking for themes that are perfect for education. And when you apply, obviously, you start seeing that if you just look at the way these things are looking like, Buildora Architect here, it looks like something that you may use for an entity like UNZA or any other university, if you notice, right? Yeah, because there are a lot of themes, is it? Like 14,000 they're telling us, and if I filter by education, I have access to 875, so I can focus my attention on this. If I am, on the other hand, let's say, I'll take this, I'm building a website, there's this new organization that has come to you and tells you, I want you to help me build, or I'm a photographer, or I'm a news site, I'm Zambia Daily Mail and we don't have a website. Can you build a website for us? You can quickly build something for them as a starting point by using WordPress, and then you filter through news templates, 1,885 of them, and then you scroll through them to try and find out which one would be perfect for your client in this particular case, right? So again, you notice that at this level, right, we had a standalone application. I was highlighting problems, right? It's a website, right? And we said, instead of building the website, we went with the option, I'll call this option 2, where we are using a CMS. And in our case, we are using WordPress. What is important is that I walked us through the process that I went through, and I was going through this workflow. I have requirements, I want to build a blog. Okay, I try and find what tools can I use, right? CMSs, Joomla, Drupal, WordPress, PHP Fusion. There's a lot of there's actually a lot of options that you'd have, CMSs, right? So you refine your requirements. If you're happy with the requirements, you proceed, right? If you're not, you refine your requirements and then you alter the specification. You evaluate the software tools until you get to a stage where, because in this particular case we're using a standalone application, we configure the system. And in my case, the way I configured it initially, by the way, it'll be like configuration, because WordPress by default will not have these menu items. It won't have like the name of the site. So the name of my blog, for instance, in this particular case is my full name, like in Phiri, and then I have these menu items. So this was part of configuration. And then stage 2 here would be, I have the website quite right, but I want to work on the user interface. Right? Option 1 I said was I could write my HTML code myself, or I can build my theme myself. But what did I decide to do? Reuse a theme, right? I reuse a theme. So I went to the theme directory and I found themes. And by the way, over the years, my website has evolved. I think I was showcasing this to you when I went to the Wayback Machine, if you remember. And you notice that currently my blog, because when I install themes, when I'm experimenting with themes, I don't uninstall them, right? I maintain them in the event that in the future and they want my website to look exactly as it looked maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Because these themes, observe, these themes will have corresponding updates, right? The people behind the themes will make changes to the themes. So the theme evolves. When they're making changes, they're going through this SDL cycle you looked at, right? Remember, so as part of evolution, you're changing the theme and stuff. So I have all these different options here. All of these different options. And each one of them I can test out to see how, kind of like my website would potentially look like, right? And then decide if I want to change the theme or not. Okay, so there's that, right? But it turns out that if you look at the case example I'm looking at, like my website has, and you gotta be careful here. If you notice, once I change my theme, because my content is kind of like dependent on, most of the modifications assume the current theme. You notice here that there's text that is like overlapping and stuff. So I would have to again configure this theme, right? So that what is rendered appears very professional. So I wouldn't really use pop blue here. It's horrible, I guess. Probably want to go for something else, right? But the key thing here is there is more, right? Besides the theme, what you begin to notice if I go to my website is the other things, right? Like for instance, there's this panel, right? If I go to my website, I think I'll have to switch it on. I think I switched it off or something. But I typically have a panel. No, it's not off. If I go on a particular site, a particular page like this, a post, I have this and I need to change it here because some of the socials are not appearing, only Twitter here. But the idea behind this feature is that when somebody is reading this post and they want to share it with other people, instead of copying the link here and going to Facebook and then you paste it in your post, what you can do is you can just say like, or you share, or you tweet it. And what's happening really when you're sharing or tweeting is the way this plugin works is for Twitter, for instance, is it is interacting with the Twitter API, right? Because Twitter is such a, or it's now an X API, because Twitter or X is such a popular social media platform, you assume that the vast majority of sites or applications that are being built would at some point need to be interfaced with Twitter, right? Or X. Yeah. So what's happening is the way this plugin works is when somebody clicks like, this plugin, this is a plugin, by the way. This plugin is actually sending a request to the X API. A response comes back, and that response will kind of change the button here to showcase that you have liked it or something. But usually the way this works is you'd be asked to log into X or something like that. You know. Anyways, quite a number of things here. So there are plugins, right? And what you notice when you go to my website here is that I have a number of services that are not a part of the larger WordPress application. Right? If I install WordPress, the default feature of WordPress will not have some of the things that you're seeing here. For instance, WordPress will not allow you it will not allow people that are accessing your blog to subscribe for updates. And the default installation. WordPress will not allow you to showcase how many people are currently online. So currently on my website, there are 4 visitors. There are 2 people that are 2 actual people, and then there are 2 bots, right? In fact, I can even look at the map of visitors, for instance. When I click here, I have access to a map of visitors like this. And the way this works is, I'll just say large world or something, so that you kind of see this. The way this works is very large. That's large. So the way this works is, it shows you in the last, this is what, in the last 30 days, if you look at these dots here, in the last 30 days, this is where, you know, visitors on my sites have originated from, traffic is originating from. Right? There's some people from South America, from North America there, you know, a few people from Europe, you know, some from the Indian subcontinent, I guess, a few from Russia, yeah, just a handful from Russia, and then some from Asia here, right? Southeast Asia. Now, the idea is the default installation of WordPress will not have this. So how do you achieve this? Well, one option is you can modify WordPress so that it renders this, or you can install a plugin. So what I've done is I've installed plugins that allow me to do this, plugins that render the things that are on my tweet stream, if you notice here. So I'm showing a series of tweets originating from a Twitter account or my X account. I'd have to change this here, update this, because it's no longer Twitter, it's supposed to be X stream here. And then I have a plugin as well that shows me the people that are online ideally. Right? So what are we saying here? Well, we are saying that because WordPress, or because CMSs are generic, they're used by different entities, the way that you modify them, one of the ways in which you configure them or you modify them so that they are suited for your use case, like for a personal blog or a news website or a university website, is the themes, and then you install plugins. For instance, for a university, I guess it's a university website, one of the things you may want to do is you have a directory of all lecturers or something like that, college or university. And what you can do is you can just, find a plugin for that. You can build the logic yourself, or you can find a plugin. So again, if you just look up WordPress plugins, you notice that WordPress itself has a plugin directory. If you go to this plugin directory, you notice that there are people that have built, if you notice here, there browse over 61,000 plugins. These are not themes, these are plugins. So they are featured plugins, right? They are commercial plugins and stuff, or you can search. So I could say I'm building an invest website and I want to find a plugin that will allow me to render a directory or something, a directory of people, right? And so what you do is directory list, I don't know. Once you find something that is appropriate for you, you experiment with it. This is a names directory. Names directory would be appropriate in this particular case. What you're doing with the names directory is you are, in essence, you're going to install this so that it allows you to render, right? To render I don't know if there's a way of viewing, typically one of the things they will do for this sort of directories is, this sort of plugins is, there'll be a way in which you can view a sample, is it, so that you have a sense of how this thing looks like. There's a demo website here, if you notice. Right, so what you'll be doing here when you have a lot of options, like in this particular case, my result has resulted in 10,000 plugins. Out of the 81,000, about 10,000 are associated with my search for a directory. So what do? What I have to do is I have to go through this cycle here, because I'm viewing a plugin here as it's a standalone application that is going to be integrated with my website. So I've got to find potential options. I'll have to evaluate them. I'll have to refine my requirements, and then I integrate the plugin with WordPress, right? So I'll come here and I don't know, there's nothing interesting about this demo here. I don't know what this is. I wanted to see a quick demo here, but this is yeah, I don't know who that is here, but can we have a little bit of order? I'm just going to switch this thing off so that no, this is not working. I wanted to bar you guys from unmuting yourselves or something. Anyways, okay. So there's a plugins, and really this idea of plugins is so very important because it is what makes it possible for you to make your website look professional or to suit your specific use case. Ideally. Okay. Anyways, so there are plugins. Now, I want to show you something, right? You may not really appreciate the fact that I'm making extensive use of plugins here, if you notice. But I think for you to get an appreciation of the range of plugins that I could potentially be utilizing, I will go to the admin side of my WordPress, which is here. If you notice, I've logged on here, right? It says how the Lighton Phiri here. So I've logged on to my blog. And you notice from WordPress here that if I scroll down here, right? If I scroll down here, right at the bottom, there's a feature on the backend, right? That says plugins, right? And you notice here that the options that I have when I contextualize the plugins feature here is I can check the plugins that are installed on my WordPress blog in this particular case. I can add a new plugin. So if I want to add a functionality on my blog, one that doesn't currently exist, I can do that by installing a new plugin, right? Or I can get access to a plugin file editor to essentially modify some existing plugin or something like that. Now, I want to draw attention to installed plugins, right? Currently, over the years anyway, when I install plugins, sometimes I won't uninstall them, but over the years, I've experimented with a number of plugins. Why? Because I would want to integrate a standalone application, WordPress, right, that I've built or I'm building, it's constantly evolving. If I want a new feature, what do? I find a reusable component called a plugin, right? I adapt it, and then I integrate it to my WordPress blog. Okay? And the way I integrate it is I have got to install it. So you notice here, it's quite interesting. There's an about me sidebar. I don't know if I'm using this here. If you notice on the top here, throughout since is it 2009 to date, I have installed a total of 62 plugins, these are reusable components that I've integrated with my blog. Out of the 62, 55 of them are currently active, 7 are inactive, I'm not using them. And then there's 22 of them that require that I update them. If you remember, we mentioned that one of the things that is associated with plugins is the fact that you have loss of control. If you look at the disadvantages of plugins, right? There's very little control over changes associated with the plugin. In fact, if there's a new version of the plugin, you have no choice but to update your plugin, right? Otherwise, I mean, you'll be left behind or something like that, right? So I have a total of 62 plugins, 55 are active, 7 are inactive, and then 22 of them need to be updated, right? So anyways, I want to draw attention to the ones that are active, right? The ones that I'm currently using. And if I start scrolling through them, what you begin to notice is that there are some things that you may not, there are some things that I don't directly benefit from insofar as the public facing side of the application is concerned. However, they're important, right? Like for instance, I think I've stopped this, but I would advertise. I don't really believe in advertisements, but at some point I was experimenting with AdSense, right? So the idea behind AdSense is that there's a cost. They use a cost sharing kind of model, right? It's usually pay per click or something. So for each click on an ad that appears on your website, you get paid or something like that. So what I would do is I needed a way of injecting it like advertisements. I think this would make sense if I just go to Osaka Times, for instance. If you look at most of these news sites, right, you should be asking yourself, well, how do they make money? They make money by things like this, right? I know Osaka Times doesn't aggressively advertise here, but maybe if we go to an article, perhaps this may be helpful, or I guess maybe not necessarily this, but maybe if we go to Zambian Watchdog, the Zambian Watchdog site on Mwebantu, I think these may be aggressively, not a thing here, not Facebook, but maybe Mwebantu or something, website. I'm surprised that Osaka Times does not have a lot of ads here. I started from the Zen or something, try and see if I was going to, or some advertisements or something. If you look at this strip here to the right, yeah, it turns out that part of how these people would make money is through advertisements, right? In some instances, these advertisements are done explicitly. So you'll be approached, right? There could be an organization like that. This looks like, I don't know, start selling and cash in or something, I don't know. These are all ads here. There could be an organization that will recognize the fact that you have a relatively larger viewership, and so they'll approach you and you can probably start advertising on their behalf or something. Usually, a number of blogs will have quite a number of ads associated with these betting companies, especially. But anyways, so the way that I injection is I would actually configure this in such a way that it would inject ads right on my website. And the way I'll do this is I'll just specify. So if you look at the settings, you can actually specify where exactly you want this strip, the banner itself, to appear. So you don't really care where this banner is coming from. Typically, you can specify through AdSense to say, I just want to restrict advertisements on my blog to be related to education-centric content, right? I don't want anything to do with Viagra or something or some crazy advertisement like that, right? Unless if you're money hungry. So, but the key thing here is that this was made possible using this. And so the configuration of the plugin is like this, right? So I'll specify here, this is where I want, the ads to appear and stuff like that. What else is there? Well, if you look at the plugins that are active, again, I'm going to filter with these 55 active plugins. There's let's see, something I can use as an example here. Trying to see if I can find something I can use. Some of these things I don't even use them anymore, and I'll have to change them somehow. Yeah, there we go. If you look at this next gen gallery, right? It turns out that a while back I picked up a very expensive hobby, so I would regularly capture dashcam footage when I'm driving around or something, or when I'm cycling, right? And so this footage is on my YouTube channel, right? So I have the vlog channel. And so I'm thinking the problem I had was, how do I because I'm the author of that content API. So I know there's YouTube data API. One option would be to actually build code myself and then programmatically start pulling content videos from my channel. But it turns out that that's time consuming. So what did I do? Well, and I think, I don't know if this is the one actually. It may not be the one. Is it next gen? Reflecting things here. No. So this is different. This is for, I'll come back to this here. This is a plugin as well. But what next gen gallery does is it helps me with, observe, it helps me with this. So I used to, not as often as I used to, yeah, still do this, but occasionally I would usually I would use shape files and stuff, and then I create a blog, right? So in the past, actually, I've created quite a number of maps, and I'm trying to see if I can find, wow, I can find a classic example of what I want to talk about here, so that you see. So I create quite a number of maps, and a number of my maps actually, incidentally, you will find some maps, and quite a number of my maps actually have been used on certain types of things that have been published out there. So if you go here and you look at, I wonder if I can check my contributions from here. It appears I cannot. I should activate it. I wonder why I can't. I'm not rendering my contributions, but I know I can see. I can see them when I log into Wikicommons, is it? So if I log in from here, I'll be able to see the thing that I've contributed. In essence, Wikicommons is all about media, right? I mean, Wikimedia is still common, but it's images that you see, on platforms like Wikipedia typically be pulled from Wikicommons, is it? So if you look at my wiki, but why do I have to verify again? This is weird here. I think it's because I haven't. Well, maybe I'm logging on to this thing here for the first time after a very, very long time, maybe. But also, it's a new computer I'm using. So let's see if we can. We can kind of like log in here. Right, so if I log in here, you notice that under user contributions, I have quite a number of things that I've contributed, right? Quite a number of maps, and I see they don't these days. These people are not showcasing the actual kind of like images. Well, there we go. So I do a lot of this, right? I do a lot of mapping like this, yeah. So it turns out that part of the reason I do this is because when I'm talking about something that involves mapping, like for wow, I'll just search for maps here. I'll search for maps and then try and see if I can like find this, what I'm looking for here. Okay, so there's this, mapping the maybe not here, but historical voting patterns in Zambia. It's a relatively old blog or something. I don't know when this was done, but observe. So the issue I have is I have maps, right? I've created maps and I have a blog, kind of outlines exactly how I created all of these different maps, right? But the thing is, I want to render them on my blog, right? That's a problem I have. That's a dilemma I have. I can manually insert these, right, into a post. I create if you notice here, the Central Province, and then there's Copperbelt Province, Eastern Province, right? But also for each province, right, I have maps. If you notice here, I can actually, scan through these different voting patterns for this particular province, and I think I'm doing this by, is it by, I don't know if it's by year or something like that, because this is 1991. So you notice here, there's a feature, right? And as I'm scanning through here, I'm scanning through the different images, right? The pictures are supposed to be changed here. This is picture 2 of 8. If I click on next, I go to picture 3 of 8, and you notice that things are changing here. It was 1991, I get to 2001 and stuff, right? So I'm organizing these images in a very interesting manner here. But it turns out that doing this programmatically, it is possible, but it would be time consuming. So what do? Well, I look for a plugin that's going to help me render these things. And what is that plugin? It's a next-gen gallery plugin. And all I do is it turns out there's an update here. Usually, and I'll talk about this as a disadvantage, when you rush and you update, you'll find that your site becomes broken here, right? So you want to be careful before you upgrade these things here. So I installed this next-gen, plugin, and as a result, I'm able to kind of like render things like this, right? So again, if I go to my backend and check the plugins that would have been installed or something like that, you will notice that all of these 61 active plugins, collective blog, my personal blog, right? Which seemingly looks like it's well organized or something, but I'm leveraging software reuse, right? For integration and configuration ideally. Anyways, so there's that. Incidentally, by the way, one of the things that you want to do when you're evaluating plugins is you want to look at the ratings. So typically your plugin directory will have this, right? There are stars. So you look at how many people have rated this plugin. In this particular case, 4,336 of them. And out of these 4,336, you notice that the vast majority of them here have given it 5 stars. So it's an indication really that this is probably something that is quite reliable, maybe flexible, really quite handy, right? So quite a number of plugins that I have here, right? I don't want to go over all of them to explain what they are for, but I have plugins that allow me to add tabular data properly into port because it can be mission. And if you're very cautious about things like consistency, you don't want to manually add tables there, right? You have tables that are formatted differently, in other words. So I'll showcase to you an example of how I add tabular data. Under teaching, for instance, on my blog, you will notice that I have this, right? This is tabular content here, right? And I'm using that plugin to render content in a table like this. It's quite nice, I guess. It looks more professional. Anyways, but just to mention here that as you're integrating these small services we're calling plugins into WordPress, there are some plugins that are not really going to do anything meaningful to the public facing side of your website, they will nonetheless be useful, right? Like for instance, what I do is, and I don't know why I can't see the Google. Let me see if I can search for Google here. One of the things I do is, yeah, I don't know why this is not. Maybe I probably haven't done it here. But I want to track. I use Google Analytics to track, usage, right, on my website. And so I have this plugin here called Google Analytics for WordPress by Monster Insights. Yeah. Anyway, so this has nothing to do with the front-facing part of the website, but certainly useful because it gives me an idea, is it? If I attempt to go to Google Analytics here, if I log into my Google Analytics account, which I haven't logged in a very long time here, but it gives me a bit of insight into how users are using these websites that have control over, right? So our research group website, datalab.unza.zm, my blog, and all of those things, right? I can analyze. Yeah, I'll have to look at it later on. I don't know why this thing is saying. I think it's because I'm accessing Google Analytics from my UNZA assigned email address. Analytics is accessible via my personal email account ideally. Anyways, I was just trying to demonstrate that when you're building a website in this particular case, because this case study is about a website that leverages software reuse, and it turns out that some of the software that you're going to be reusing is only going to be useful on the backend, right? Not on the public-facing side of your. I really wanted to showcase this to you. I know I believe you should have discussed Google Analytics and a number of such services. I guess I have no idea here. And tick all of them. That's fine. So if you notice here, I have a number of websites. Here is it. Our enterprise medical imaging in Zambia site. Our what do you call this? Our research group website. So it's kind of showcasing to me. This is Google Analytics, nothing to do with WordPress, but it's showing me in the last 7 days the traffic, right? What people have been searching for, where they're coming from. I have no idea why people from Singapore are interested in this. Yeah, I have no idea. Well, we had some colleagues that had visited, that was South Korea though, sometime last year, and so you have access to some of these things here, right? I can check my personal website. It's listed here. Is it? I can open this up and try and gain a sense of what kind of people have been seeing on my. I don't know why this is happening here. It's weird here. My website has been hasn't been updated in a very long time, so I won't be surprised if there's little traffic here. How about this year or something like that? I would have to check later on and see what's wrong. But anyway, so all of this is possible because I have a plugin, right, that facilitates, Google Analytics plugin. I'll probably reconfigure this or something like that. Anyway, so quite a number of things here. But now that we see integration in full swing here, using this case example, right, case study example, where I've showcased a number of things here, right? How we reuse standalone applications, WordPress, how we create, like if I can use phrase, like templates for my blog, these microservices like a plugin for rendering my tweet stream, for seeing who is currently online, for sharing content and stuff. Well, the question is, we see that all of these things present advantages, but what are the disadvantages of me leveraging integration and configuration, right, on my blog? And I want to draw attention to what you're seeing here, right? There's a blog a while back, and it turns out I was doing it up. I was using what thing was that? Google Fusion Tables or something like that. So really, at the time, it was Google Fusion Tables. At the time, it was a really nice way of trying to render content, right? Ideally, but guess what? What happened was Google back in 2019, I think, they issued like a public statement, right, to say they were phasing out Google Fusion Tables. And quite common actually for Google likes doing this a lot. They'll experiment with the service and then they'll just shut it down or something if there's very few people using it ideally, right? So they sent out this notice back in 2019, and I also noticed somewhere at the bottom saying, you'll be able to download your table data, until somewhere around March 2020. So that's like 3 months after this announcement. And in fact, they were kind enough to provide alternative solutions. So they're saying, we'll phase this out, it won't be available, but most of what you use Google Fusion Tables for, can be accomplished by using, Google Maps platform, Data Studio, and all these different tools and stuff. And it turns out that in my case, right, I was so busy, and by the time I wanted to go back and download my data so that I can find an alternative, my data was gone, right? So I couldn't access my data, if you look at this. And now this speaks to that important point we raised when we were looking at disadvantages, right? Loss of control, right? I have no control over this. I had no control over Google Fusion Tables because I was not involved in it. So web service is no longer available, data is gone. And it turns out, I think the blog really is, and I wish I could find, I don't know if I can find, I don't know if I replace this, but I can try and find this blog post so that you see it. And I will try and say the map basically shows you journal. Let me try and see if I can find, there we go. I think it's this post from 2014. It's a lot of work, right? Sometimes if you're looking for an alternative to fix this, you see this, there's an error 404, right? Because the way I was integrating Google Fusion Tables is virtually useless, right? Because most of what I wrote about in here were cross-referencing the image that was here, right? The visualization, ideally. So loss of control. You want to be aware of all of those disadvantages, ideally. Anyway, so I want to pause here and try and find out if you have any specific questions associated with integration and configuration. I think we've done quite a bit here. We've discussed quite a bit when it comes to integration and configuration. Any thoughts about this? Questions? Okay. And also thinking about this problem I was highlighting here is, imagine you build a website that allows you to make payments using MTN mobile money, right? And at some point in the future, MTN mobile money just goes defunct or something like that. It's like you'd have to find an alternative, right? Or switch off that thing. Or you're using MTN mobile money, so you're using the Momo API, right? Remember I mentioned that the Momo API is actually open to the public. You can use the Momo API if you want to, but they make a change to the Momo API. So endpoints that you are previously using are no longer accessible. You'll be faced with these sort of problems, right? Because you don't have control over those things. Now, there are instances where you don't have a choice, right? Like the Momo account. I mean, you want to process payments, right? And There's nothing like I will choose not to use Momo, right? Because people that are using mobile money here will find it difficult to pay. But when it comes to things like single sign-on, you have the option, right? You don't want to implement single sign-on by just using Google, right? You probably want to have a mix of Google, kind of Facebook, login using X, right? Login using Instagram or something like that. In fact, what you guys should be doing is thinking about, can we build an authorization and authentication feature that developers can use to enable people to log in using your MTN mobile money, MTN is just log in with your number. That's single sign-on. That's better, is it? Because the vast majority of people in Zambia have phone numbers, right? So why can't you build an authorization and authentication feature that facilitates that? But anyways, if there are no questions, suggestions, I'm going to suggest that we transition to our next discussion. Remember, this is double period. I'm just going to ask for I'm going to pause for a minute printing, and I just want to check on what I'm printing. Hopefully this will give you an opportunity to kind of like think about questions as well on integration and configuration. Just give me a minute. All right, I'm back. So remember again, it's a double period. I don't know if you people have thought about questions. I'm always almost every year I latch on to examples that can be linked to our context, with the hope that some of you guys are going to wake up and try and see if you can do some of these things, right? If you look at integration and configuration relative to what? Relative to web services. Well, yeah, web services everywhere, right? If you think of endless types of applications you can build by using the Facebook Graph API. Everybody's on Facebook now. Did you know that WhatsApp has an API? Right? There's an API. Think of the endless types of services, right? that you can build, right? Like, by integrating this different sort of API. Because WhatsApp, I mean, all my family members here, my mother uses WhatsApp in this case here. But I guess you guys don't want to think about some of these things. It's quite sad, really, right? But that's okay. Anyways, if there are no questions, we're going to continue our discussion. And we're going to start our discussion of iterative and implemented development. Just to mention here that this is not, so this discussion is still looking at software process models, but just to mention that when we're talking about iterative and incremental development here, on its own, it's actually not a classical software process model, so there are different variations, right? It's just like a way in which you develop software, but there's specific instances of, software process models that are incremental in nature, ideally, right? Incidentally, there's a subgroup of software process models that are considered agile approaches to development. And one of those things that we're going to focus on is the infamous, or just called the famous Scrum, ideally, right? But anyways, so the diagram just kind of showcases your typical incremental and iterative development approach. And what you begin to notice when you look at this diagram is something that is somewhat different from what we're used to, right? Compare and contrast with the waterfall model and where we are coming from, right? If you look at this diagram here, slightly different from what you have here. So the name itself kind of gives away what these approaches focus on, right? So iterative meaning that you are looping, ideally. Remember a discussion of introduction programming in 2010, right? They're saying there's a for loop where you repeatedly do things over and over again for X number of time or something like that, right? Or a while loop where you are looping until the condition is false or something like that. Well, it turns out that the software process models that we're going to be looking at are iterative in nature, because what you do when you're leveraging them is you're essentially going through the software development lifecycle phases that we discussed in rapid succession, right? So if you notice what is at the middle here, we have a series of these concurrent activities that can be mapped onto the SDLC phases, right? And also what is important is, if you notice what is on the far right here, is what we're calling versions. There's an initial version, intermediate version, and final version. So the idea behind that is we're showcasing the fact that because your software process model can be both iterative and incremental, or it can just be iterative, right? If it's iterative and incremental in nature, what you're saying is that at the end of each cycle, you are producing some version of software, okay? And usually when you're building software in such a way that you are looping through cycles, you are going to have multiple versions of the software. So in our case, we have 3 versions, right? Version 1, which is initial version. Version 2, which is the intermediate version. And version 3, which is the final version. Okay? Anyways, so iterative because you are cycling through. So it's like in the waterfall model, if you remember, we said what we are doing is we first of all handle requirements engineering, and then we go to, or we start off with requirements elicitation, and then we go to requirement specification, and then we go to software design, and then we go to implementation, and then we go to, I guess it's like testing or something, and then we go to deployment, right? Or evolution, ideally. Yeah. Well, when you're leveraging an iterative and incremental software process model, what you do is you cycle through the SDLC phases in quick succession. So you are redoing this, right? You are repeating this over and over again. If that is making sense here. I hope it is making sense, which I suspect it is making, should be making sense. All right. So we see here that it turns out that if you look at how software is presently developed currently, a number of projects will actually leverage a combination of iterative and incremental approaches, because usually there's over the years there's been this increasing push, ideally, right, to quickly build software and deliver to the client, the customer. So the vast majority of people typically build software in such a way that they are leveraging these iterative and incremental software process models. And like I said, these models are ideally incremental because development work is segmented into small deliverable increments. In this particular case, with the things on the far right, initial versions. And it's usually the case that you prioritize your features and you say, version 1, we're going to produce after a month. and it will include these complete features. Once you're done, you actually deploy the system with those features so that users can already start using the the software, although it won't be complete. Okay, and I wanna draw attention here to something that we are doing as the UNZA here. I keep on mentioning that I've been involved with the HR platform, and that I don't know if I've mentioned this, but there are some features that have yet to be completed. Okay, so the HR platform I'm referring to is this. If I go to hr.unza.zm, we use this to apply for leave and stuff. I think I've showcased this, right? I don't think this applies to you. You don't use it because you're not employed by UNZA. Human resources, HR, right? So, but what you begin to notice is that there's some features that are not like my training. I don't think it's there. Oh, maybe it is there actually. It's implemented, but there's some features that have yet to be switched on, right? And it turns out that this is still work in progress. Anyway, so incremental in that, the development work is segmented into small deliverable increments, right? So you're delivering value to the client in small increments. It's iterative because you're looping, you're repeatedly going through the SDLC life cycle, right? Anyways, hope this is making sense. Okay, again, just showcasing value versus, so incremental, iterative, right? Concurrently. The thing here is for you to get these increments, you need to iterate, right? In some instances, you can iterate without getting an increment. You're just quickly exploring or something like that. It is possible. Now, before we start looking at specific examples of iterative and incremental software process models, it becomes important for us to appreciate why these approaches to development are important, right? Collectively. Yeah. The question we want to answer is why exactly would we want to use a software process model that's iterative and incremental? Well, it turns out that change is inevitable when you're building software. Whether you like it or not, clients will always come back to you and tell you that they want some aspect of the software to be changed. And we had a discussion about this, right? Changing business requirements, you know, evolution of or hardware upgrades and software. So is it components of software applications that you're using? The versions will change. You know, when you start building the software, you'll probably be using you're using Ubuntu 24.4 here, .4. But 2 years from now, there'll be a completely different version, right? All of those changes here, those uncertainties will warrant or require that you change your requirements ideally. So here's the thing, right? It's like if you decide to use iterative and incremental software process models, if there's a change that is associated with like these rapidly evolving customer needs here, it turns out that incorporating those changes, the cost of incorporating those changes is drastically reduced. Why? Because you're quickly exposing the piece of software that you're building to the user, ideally. So imagine I'm building a website, right? My personal website here, this blog. The one approach I have, I want to compare this with the waterfall model, is task, build a Phiri's website or something. The one approach you take is you say, I'm going to use the waterfall model, right? And they've told you the requirements here, want this in 6 months. If you want to take the waterfall model here, you're going to say, well, we're going to sit down with Lighton and then elicit requirements. We'll come up with the software requirement specification document. So maybe this will take us 1 month. Maybe this will take us, or just maybe 2 months or something. This will take us maybe 1 month or half a month here. And then the design, maybe it's going to take us half a month as well. Right? And then we say the implementation will take us maybe 2 months. And then you have testing, right? Which will take us maybe 1 month or something. And then you deploy or something like that. Now, if you take this sort of approach, right, you begin to notice that you only be able to interact with the client using the waterfall model after 3 months, right? So 2 months of elicitation, a month of specification. In month 4 is when, actually not after 2 months here. In month 6 is when you're interacting with the client. Because you spend 2 months eliciting requirements, half a month looking at the coming up with a software requirement specification document, which has got to be signed off, obviously. And then design will take you half a month as well. Implementation, 2 months. So you'll only be able to start testing what you've built after the 6 months. Now, the problem with that is that in month number 6 here, probably Lighton will come to you and tell you, say, no, but I wanted this to appear like this, right? Maybe I didn't want a horizontal menu, or there's this feature that you haven't implemented correctly or something like that, right? It's like, how do you do this? Well, but compare and contrast with what you would be doing if you're using incremental, iterative and incremental software model, right? And in this particular case, obviously, what you'll be doing is you break apart the 6 months, right? You say, we're going to be looping here. We're going to be looping through 6 iterations, right? And so in each iteration, it will be like, iteration number 1, that's the task here. Iteration number 1, we're going to identify features, obviously, right? Iteration number 1, we are targeting the interface here. We want to get it right. We want to make sure that, all the menus exactly as Lighton wants, right? So you say, we're going to spend month 1 here, just exposing, looking at the interface, right? But in this iteration as well, what you'll be doing is saying, we're going to be looping through every week. So every week, you make a change to the interface. What you're doing is, because the changes you're making to the interface are tied to the specification. So every week, what you're doing is you expose, you work on the specification, you make a change, you get feedback from the user as well, right? And the beauty with this, you begin to notice, is that it becomes relatively easy for you to start integrating these changes. Yeah. Hope you're noticing that here. And maybe in iteration number 2, for instance, you say we're going to focus on a specific feature here. Maybe one of the features you discover. So anyways, the key thing here is that the cost of changing requirements are reduced, right? As I'm looping here, if I notice something that was off in the previous iteration, I will point it out and then you rectify that, right? So you won't be forced with a situation where you have to spend tremendous amount of money trying to sort out these changing customer requirements. But also, what you begin to notice is feedback, right? Feedback, it turns out, is quite important from the user. If I'm using the waterfall model, the only time when I'll be getting feedback is during testing. So in month number 6. Whereas if I'm using an iterative and incremental software process model, I'm literally getting feedback in each iteration. And really, it turns out that for certain software process models like Scrum, you get to define what's called a sprint, is it? Like how long you're going to be iterating. So if you're iterating every week, you're getting feedback from the client every week. Whereas the feedback you're going to get with the waterfall model is right at the end here, just once, right? Probably some workshop style interaction, if you will. Anyways, so it's easy to get feedback. And then we see here that there's more rapid delivery of features of the software and development actually. So if you are, there are some approaches where you'd be incrementally deploying versions of the software that you're building, right? So in other words, if we're building Lighton's website, instead of Lighton waiting for month 6 for the website to be deployed, you say in each iteration, once you're done with the interface, you say, well, we're done with this feature, we've actually deployed it, it's accessible, it's publicly accessible, so people will be able to access the website. I mean, at this point, maybe it will be static or something like that, but there's still some value, is it? You've delivered some value ideally. So it's in increments. So it's quite easy to assess progress like that. Now, in terms of its advantage, obviously, because you're quickly doing things here, we see that the process itself is not really easily visible, is it? There's no plan, there's no like rigorous plan here or systematic way of trying to measure progress. It turns out that measuring progress is usually very difficult. In certain techniques like Scrum, you typically have got to deliberately include activities that will help you measure progress, like your sprint retrospective or sprint review, for instance, which we will discuss at length, by the way. Anyways, so the other disadvantage is the system structure will tend to degrade here with new increments. So you notice here that as you're evolving in each increment here, you're modifying the design, the specification, right? They're constantly changing. So the structure is kind of like degrading like that. But of course, I mean, they're kind of like established ways of handling all of these different disadvantages, right? All right. Now, what comes next, unless if there are any questions, what comes next is we're supposed to start having discussions of specific software process models that are iterative and incremental in nature. And what we do in the course is we typically cherry pick. So we will look at RAD, or Rapid Application Development. We're supposed to look at the spiral model. These are all classic, software process models. And then we will, after our discussion with the spiral model, we're supposed to have a discussion of, I believe there should be RUP, which is Rational Unified Process. And what you will notice is that in all of these different models, right, you are iterating. In some instances, you're delivering value, right, incrementally. But the way that you're doing it is somewhat different. The practices are different. That's the only difference that is there. The focus would be different. In some instances, the focus is on risk management, for instance, and stuff. And then we'll look at agile methodologies or techniques where we use Scrum as a case example. I'm going to pause here and try and find out if there are questions. I'm transitioning to a different class. I don't know if people have any specific questions about iterative and incremental software process models, their advantages and disadvantages. Okay, if there are no questions, I will be reaching out to the course representatives. I think we have, we're supposed to have a makeup class or something, if not 2, I believe, I don't know. I'll reach out so that we can have a session tomorrow, I guess. I think we have a number of makeup classes. Somebody wants an explanation of plugins. I'm going to share this recording and then you can play it back, right? Have questions you can ask away when I meet you or something. Yes, Muka has a question.
No, sir, it's not a question, but I wanted to ask for the notes on Moodle because I sent you an email yesterday.
Oh, I remember the name, but in your email you were talking about 3010, and I told you that I don't teach 3010, right? And I was asking you, are you referring to 3020 or something? So this is 3020, this is not 3010. But I don't know, I have since uploaded the notes. The only thing I've not uploaded is the recorded lectures. I've actually uploaded them, but I haven't had the chance to add them to a playlist or something like that. But the notes are available on the Moodle, actually. The notes are available on the Moodle. I guess, I don't know. Yeah, so I want to check, and then, yeah. So they're there. I've uploaded, and when you sent that email, that's I think I misrepresented this. I thought this was tied to 2034 here, and in my mind I had it. I was thinking that I'd actually uploaded the notes when I was thinking about 2034 or something like that. So they're there. You should be able to access module number 2, actually, which has what? Is it like 338 slides? Okay, if there are no questions, I will see you when you see me. Bye. I'll be please be on the lookout for your course trips. If you are traveling, you want to make sure you have enough bundles. We shall have I know where people travel to here. We shall have class on Saturday or Sunday or something like that. Thanks. Bye.